Star Trek has 7 live-action series. Ask most people to rank them, and Voyager will end up somewhere in the middle. Behind The Next Generation, behind Deep Space Nine, occasionally behind the original series, tolerated rather than celebrated. I think that ranking is wrong. And I think the reason it is wrong tells us something interesting about how we judge television. Voyager is not the best Star Trek series, but it is significantly better than its reputation suggests, and it contains what I would argue is the single most interesting character development arc in the entire franchise. Let me make the case. First, the premise, for anyone who hasn't watched it. The USS Voyager is pulled across the galaxy to the Delta Quadrant, 70,000 light-years from Earth, by an alien entity. The journey home at warp speed would take 75 years. The crew has no starbase support, no Federation backup, no resupply. They are completely alone, in a part of the galaxy no human has ever seen. That premise is genuinely extraordinary. A Star Trek series where the safety net is gone, where every resource spent cannot be replaced, where the crew has to make moral compromises that the Enterprise crew never had to make, because the Enterprise could always call for help. The show doesn't always fully exploit that premise. That's one of the honest criticisms. There are episodes where Voyager feels too comfortable, too much like a regular Star Trek show that happens to be set far from home. The reset button gets pressed too often. Consequences that should linger disappear by the next episode. But when Voyager commits to its premise, when it actually sits with what it would mean to be truly alone, it produces television that no other Trek series managed. Captain Catherine Janeway deserves more recognition than she gets. She is the only female captain to lead a Star Trek series. That fact is noted. What is less noted is how good Kate Mulgrew's performance actually is across 7 seasons of material that range from extraordinary to mediocre. Janeway is a different kind of captain from Kirk or Picard. Kirk was instinct and charisma. Picard was authority and principle. Janeway was something harder to categorize, a scientist at heart, fiercely moral, occasionally ruthless, and carrying a weight that neither of her predecessors had to carry. She was responsible for stranding her crew 70,000 light-years from home. That is not a minor thing. It was the right decision, the only decision she could have made given the circumstances. But it cost her crew their lives as they knew them, their families, their futures, everything they had planned. She carried that, every season, without the show always acknowledging it explicitly. Mulgrew put it in the performance whether the scripts call for it or not. That is the kind of acting that deserves more credit than it receives. And then there is 7 of 9. Jeri Ryan joined Voyager in Season 4. The character, a human woman who had been assimilated by the Borg as a child and was now being returned to humanity, was on paper a risk. A new character introduced to boost ratings, given a distinctive appearance that could easily have made her a superficial addition to the show. It is worth being honest about how she actually arrived, because the full story is more interesting than the sanitized version. 7 of 9 was brought in partly as a ratings calculation. Voyager's numbers had dipped, and UPN, the network, wanted a more visually striking character. The Borg angle was the creative hook. The costume and the casting were explicitly designed to attract attention. A Borg drone returning to humanity, yes, but also a character whose appearance would make people stop on the channel guide. That is not a secret. It is documented, and it would be easy to dismiss the character on those grounds alone, as a cynical commercial decision wearing science fiction clothing. But here is what nobody quite planned for. Jeri Ryan took that premise and built something from it that went far beyond what the original brief required. And the writers, particularly in the later seasons, gave her material that matched what she was capable of. What started as a ratings calculation became something genuinely extraordinary, an exploration of identity, of what it means to choose who you are when everything that made you has been taken away. The character deserved better than the circumstances of her arrival. She got it anyway. That is rarer than it sounds. And perhaps the simplest way to measure that arc is this. 7 of 9 arrived on Voyager saying, "This is unacceptable," about almost everything human, cold, precise, contemptuous of inefficiency and emotion. By the time the series ended, she was a loved and integral part of that crew, not because she became fully human, but because she found her own way of being both things at once, neither fully Borg nor fully human, something new. That journey from "this is unacceptable" to belonging is what great character writing looks like. What actually happened is one of the great character arcs in science fiction television. 7 of 9 is fascinating because her journey is the inverse of almost every other character arc in Star Trek. Most characters in Trek start human and become more capable. 7 starts as something beyond human, efficient, precise, operating at a level of cognitive and physical capability no human could match, and has to learn to be less than she was, to be limited, to be uncertain, to feel things she cannot process as data. The Borg had given her perfection of a kind. Humanity offers her something messier, more painful, and ultimately more real. And the show, at its best, takes that tension seriously. Her relationship with Janeway is the emotional heart of the later seasons, not romantic, something more interesting than that. A mentor relationship between two extraordinarily capable women who approached existence in completely different ways and found in each other something they couldn't find elsewhere. The episodes that focused on 7, her attempts to understand human connection, her memories of assimilation, her complicated relationship with the family she had before the Borg, are some of the finest individual episodes in the entire franchise. What Voyager got wrong is worth acknowledging honestly. The Kazon, the main antagonists of the early seasons, were poorly conceived and poorly executed, a pale imitation of the Klingons without the depth or the history that made the Klingons work. The show knew it, which is why they were quietly dropped after Season 2. The reset button problem was real. Episodes that should have had lasting consequences, crew members lost, ship systems damaged, moral choices that should have changed the characters, were often resolved or forgotten within an episode or two. For a show about a crew genuinely stranded with no support, the lack of lasting consequences undermined the premise repeatedly. And the final season, while containing some excellent individual episodes, rushed toward an ending that felt less earned than Deep Space Nine's extraordinary finale, or even the Next Generation's emotional send-off. But here is what I keep coming back to. 7 of 9 appeared in Picard. Older, harder. A ranger outside Federation law, operating in the margins of a society that had never fully accepted her, carrying everything Voyager left unresolved about what it means to be human when you have been something else. And she was the best thing in Picard by some distance. The character had grown in exactly the direction the Voyager years suggested she would grow. Jeri Ryan picked up the thread 20 years later and proved that what had been built in those 7 seasons was real enough to sustain. That doesn't happen with superficial characters. That doesn't happen with shows that weren't doing something genuine. Voyager was doing something genuine. It didn't always succeed, but the foundation it built was strong enough to carry a character across 2 decades and into one of the best moments of a new series. That is not nothing. That is, in fact, quite a lot. If you have dismissed Voyager, start with Season 4. Watch the episodes that centre on 7. Watch Janeway navigate the impossible position she is in. Watch what the show does when it commits to its own premise, rather than retreating to the safety of the familiar. And if you loved it from the beginning, you already know. Voyager deserved better than its reputation. 7 of 9 deserved every award she didn't win. And Janeway deserved to be mentioned in the same breath as Kirk and Picard. She still does. Next time, something different. See you then. If you're tired of sci-fi content that doesn't take the genre seriously, hit like, it helps. Subscribe and join the conversation. New video every week. Out there is exactly where we're going.